Hey, this is Marcus Fairs, founder and editor-in-chief of Dezeen, broadcasting live from the Dezeen studio in London for the third of our Miami Design Talks series. And today we're not going to Miami, we're going to Vienna, where we have Thomas Traxler and Katerina Mischa of Mischer'Traxler. I had to reverse the order of your names because you're sitting around the other way. But hey, Thomas. Hey, Katerina. How you doing?
Hi, hello. Good, thank you. Thanks, nice to see you again.
Yeah.
Yeah, you say again because we did a talk a few weeks ago, didn't we, as part of Vienna Design Week?
So.
Yes.
And I know you're not in Miami, but you've made an effort to make it look like you might be in some kind of tropical beach place. We've got some kind of jungle behind you there.
Yes, actually, like normally in summer they're in the yard, but now that it's starting freezing, they all had to move somewhere, like the plants. So we have a nice little greenhouse, but it doesn't feel like Miami. It's quite cold.
It definitely doesn't feel like Miami where I am right here, I can tell you. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you? What do you do? And where are you right now?
Well, we are, as said, in Vienna. We have our practice here since more than 10 years under the name Mischer'Traxler, both of our surnames. And our work ranges from products and furnitures up to installations, and lately as well, a bit of curation. So we have quite a bit broad width of various projects.
Yeah, and we collaborate either with like producing companies or galleries or cultural institutions or companies. Yes.
And the reason we're doing this talk with you today is because you've been working with Perrier-Jouet, the champagne brand, on an installation which has opened in Miami. You're not there to see the installation, but it's based on a project you designed with Perrier-Jouet a few years ago, because you've had a relationship with Perrier-Jouet for several years now. Tell us about your relationship with the brand. What has it involved and what kind of projects have you been doing with them?
Well, basically, it started in 2013 when they approached us to come up with a project for Design Miami 2014. And since then, we have really a nice dialogue. It feels natural because, I don't know, I think we share certain interests and we are inspired by nature, and they have a connection with Art Nouveau, which depicts a lot of natural elements, especially in the French Art Nouveau. So it comes as a nice dialogue, and the pieces we made for them, we will later show as well in our presentation, but the pieces we made, they still have, they still feel like interesting pieces to be shown in exhibitions, or we refer to them a lot when we talk about our nature-related projects. So it comes very natural to talk with them about projects and possibilities.
And you mentioned that you did an installation for them in 2014. Well, we were there together in Miami, weren't we? We made a film about the installation. Just briefly tell us what it was you did in 2014. What was that project?
It's actually also included afterwards a little bit. So it was a project which is about the relation between human and nature, and this kind of respectful distance we should maybe have, and this kind of respectful dialogue. And this was like kinetic pieces of a table and mirrors.
So maybe the best thing is for you to show the presentation, then you can explain the project, the new project as well. So do you want to fire up and share your screen now?
Okay. So yes. So I mean, in general, we as a studio, I think we often do projects which are related to nature, to highly endangered species or nearly extinct species, or we work with natural influences like sunlight, or we talk about like relations where materials are coming from. So as said before, the relation to work with Perrier-Jouet became very natural, and it all started in 2014. And they invited us to think about the project for Miami, and to the topic of Art Nouveau and kind of our own interpretation of Art Nouveau. And so we went to the Maison Belle Époque, which is in Épernay, and there you really see kind of the connection of Perrier-Jouet to Art Nouveau. On the one hand, the drawing of the anemone on the Belle Époque champagne bottle is by Émile Gallet, and in the house they have a huge collection and a really incredible collection about like French Art Nouveau pieces. From Guimard, Émile Gallet, Majorelle. And so you and what was for us very interesting is that, of course, like the piece is very often referred to nature and to natural elements. And so we thought for the first project actually for Design Miami to create the installation called Ephemera. And it's about the dialogue between mankind and nature and how we should kind of think about it, and that it is a very kind of action and reaction, and that we have an influence. And so we made these 3 interactive connected projects. So one was kind of a big table and 2 mirrors. And if you looked at the table from a distance, actually all the floral elements kind of stood up and moved gently in its own choreography. And if you came close, the species or the floral elements around you kind of retreated and inserted into the table surface again to suggest the kind of functionality. And all the species we depicted were from all over the world, and we searched for them in 3 different categories. So the one was like extinct and highly endangered species. The other ones were very common and species which are in close relation to humans, and the other one were new discovered species. So we tried to kind of look at the whole spectrum of nature and also our influence we have on it. And for the execution, actually, we were of course very inspired by the marquetry and tried to put the marquetry into the piece, even though with new technologies, of course, like laser cutting and water jet cutting and so on. And then we were super happy when Perret-Jouët asked us if we would like to also think of an installation for the London Design Festival in 2015. And it was planned that it's in the Victoria and Albert Museum, and we thought it makes sense to continue actually the story of this dialogue and this action and reaction, but we wanted to focus on a different part, and therefore we decided to focus on insects, because also in the furniture pieces there are a lot of kind of insects in marquetry, also like tables which are very have kind of a dragonfly and all these kind of insect elements. And so we decided to create an installation which is called Curiosity Cloud, and where you as a visitor approach it, that artificial insects are in a bulb, and when you approach it they kind of light up and the insects start moving around, and that they kind of seem to want to fly away, but they're encapsulated or protected, it depends how you see it actually, in the glass vessels.
So for the making, we basically started researching of how we could make the artificial handmade insects, because of course you can see in the video not all the first tests were very successful. So in the end, we by doing and experimenting, we came to nice solutions. And we tried as well to build everything in Vienna. So we collaborated with a lot of crafts and craftsmen and companies directly here in Vienna. So the glass vessels were mouth blown by Lobmeier, and then they were hand finished in order to fit our requirements. And as well, we worked with a local metal spinning company that worked on the caps that hold the bulbs in position in the cloud. And yeah, we did the whole installation, whole insects for the installation in the studio, in the space. And when experimenting with the insects and testing them if they all function the way they should, it was very interesting to see that really the different kinds of species have different flight patterns, which obviously, if you think about it and if you think of aerodynamics, it makes sense that they fly differently. But when we envisioned the project, it was not something we had planned that they would, of course, fly differently. So it was a nice surprise for us. And then the piece was unveiled at the V&A in 2015, and it was more than 250 bulbs. And it was lovely to see how the audience was really interacting with the piece, because most people understood this interaction level and engaged with the piece. But at the same time, we got questions like, are we toxic? Do they want to fly away? And it was this setting in this museum that we could talk about this protection level and having the real world. And it was nice to really see this engagement. And even now we sometimes meet people and we see that the piece still resonates with them, because we get these questions. like if we continue with the project and they still remember it because of this dialogue between them and nature and which influences humans have. And for us, this is really rewarding to see that this piece still stays with people. And what was nice in the collaboration with Perigette, that the pieces didn't end up in boxes in storage in the cellar, but actually ephemera, like the table, and a small version of the Curiosity Cloud are now in the house in Epernay, in the Maison Belle Epoque, together with all these fantastic Art Nouveau pieces. So basically our inspiration and our results, they are all in the same house, and there they still welcome visitors and bring this idea of this dialogue, man and nature, to them. And in the collaboration, we as well worked on some special limited editions in the packaging. And here you can see, for example, there was one bottle where we then brought all the insects that were shown in the Curiosity Cloud. They were then on some of the special edition vintage bottle. And we liked that basically the whole project had this long line of continuation, and that this story could be told in various means.
And so we were also super happy when actually in 2018, the Cooper Hewitt Museum approached us if it would be possible to show the Curiosity Cloud installation at the Nature Triennale in 2019. And of course, us and also Perrier-Jouët was super happy to loan the piece, but soon in the dialogue also like with the curators of the exhibition, and also I think our intention was that we could bring it in a local context. And so it was decided that not just, I mean, here you see that also kind of the size was adapted, and that it was adapted that it could hang in the room and so on, but that we also adapt actually all the species which were included and focus on North American species. And so for that, we started again all the research into the insects, looked what on kind of extinct and highly endangered species in North America, or also very common species. And then we included a new category, which is kind of alien species or invasive species, because we think it's a very important topic also to talk about in our relationship, that by our means of transportation, traveling, and shipping and everything, kind of suddenly, or sometimes also unintentional, but certain species are suddenly ending up in a different part of the world, and suddenly are in a different context. And so we think this influence actually is also an important topic. So this we included actually in the project, and then we again started to build all the insects. So you see here the single elements. It's so that it's a foil which is printed and then laser cut, and all the bodies are made by felt and painted, and the antennas with like fishing wires, and so on. So we created again the insects and also kind of show the research or the short stories of the species. So here you see, for example, the spiny oakworm moth, which is now just endemic in the East US anymore, and it's already extinct in Canada. So that also our influences on, because it's mainly living in oak forest, our change of the environment also has a change of the insects and the influence of it. And so for the chandelier in which is now in Miami, actually, it was the first thought was actually that we include the species or the North American species in the chandelier again to resonate or to adapt to the topic of this year's Design Miami Americas theme. But on the other hand, because we cannot go there to build it up, so we had to adapt all the kind of technology that we can control everything also from abroad, from Vienna, to see if everything is functioning, if something needs to be adapted. So it was more kind of the more technical adaptation as well.
This is a quick view of how it looks now in the Moore building in Miami. The chandelier itself is consisting of 22 bulbs, so it's way smaller than the big cloud, but still enough to have this effect and a sense and still gives a sensory experience. So 22 bulbs in 3 different sizes, like from, well, 3 different sizes, small, medium and large. And we actually picked 19 different insects that fit the North America context. And it's interactive, so the chandelier reacts as well to each single person approaching it. And when you enter now Design Miami, it's one of the first things people can see, which is lovely. So it greets the visitors and basically says hello to them.
Says hello. And from the chandelier is usually, if no one is around, just 2 or 3 of the insects are fluttering around. We call it this alluring mode, that they kind of make, you hear the sound, you see the light, it makes people curious to maybe go close. And then if you go close, the bulbs around you actually start to light up and the insects start fluttering around and emitting the sound. And so you can walk around the whole installation, kind of interact. You see how also the light dynamics and everything is changing, and your personal kind of influence on the project. And we always see it as like this one part, that the first layer is actually the visual layer, and also this experiential layer and the sensual layer. And then you can go to the second layer, which is then the insects and more the information to the insects, which are more depicted and shown like in the Natural History Museum, like pinned up and with this short biography. And then you can kind of go to the second stage maybe and get more information about it. And so we hope that everyone who is in Miami and can experience this can actually experience it in a very personal manner, and also relate to it in a personal matter, and hopefully thinks about kind of his own dialogue in nature and the relation, and also the impact we actually have on our natural surrounding. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Welcome back. So first of all, how is it for you not to be able to travel to Miami to install this piece? And how did you handle the logistics of it? Did you just put it in a crate and send it off?
Not directly. I mean, we actually had the piece here. We adapted it accordingly that it could be set up by another team, because normally a lot of times we travel with our pieces, especially if they are shown the first time, to make sure that everything worked smoothly. So this time we had to be sure when it shipped that everything will be possible to be done by someone else. So we had as well a little manual, how to unpack it, how to do. And so it wasn't just packing it, and especially like there was that tiny details as well, you know, arranging height according to the building and things like that. So no, unfortunately, it was not just packing it and shipping it.
But yeah, due to like
the circumstances
or whatever, it's also easier to recheck and do it from abroad, and just kind of.
And maybe
I think it's more preparation, but afterwards it's also quite easy.
And so maybe we can learn from it that not everywhere you have. I mean, of course, we love traveling. Don't get us wrong, but at the same time, maybe for certain reasons, not everyone has to travel everywhere, and maybe that's something we can really learn from the current situation, that maybe one doesn't have to travel everywhere all the time.
Well, we can't at the moment at all. And you mentioned that the sound that it makes, is that the sound literally of the insect hitting the glass, or is there an additional sound effect on top of that?
No, it's just the insect hitting on glass. And I think it was also very interesting in the beginning, actually, to find the right material to build the insects on, because we tried several materials from different plastic foils, metal, and so on, but all the different materials also changed the sound until we found kind of the best solution. And it's just the insects fluttering around and kind of hitting the glass bulbs.
And when we originally designed the piece, it was not that we were meant to make a sound installation. Basically, we wanted this effect that you scare the insects and they want to fly away. And naturally, then with the first tests, we realized, of course, this will make sound. And then designing the insect so that the sound level is something still appealing and nice to the ear, but not, I mean, if you really are in the room the whole day with the insect, it gets really annoying, I have to say. So it had to have this in between, that for an experience, it's really lovely and nice, and not too loud and annoying. And finding that material was actually, experimenting with a lot of different choices.
And how robust are the insects? Because I imagine if they're smashing against the glass for several days, they might start to fall apart.
Yeah, we have still a lot here. I mean, I don't know if you can see.
No, they're actually quite
they're
robust.
quite robust because the plastic foil, and we had to use plastic foil because a lot of other materials were falling apart, is quite robust, and the body is really stuck to it properly. And every now and then maybe an antenna comes off, but then I have to say that that would happen with other ones too. What's interesting that apparently we made them well enough that some people, sometimes in the first moment we got from a few visitors the question if they are real, even though, of course we say, well, we couldn't take real specimens because they would fall apart immediately. But in the first moment, some people get the idea that they could have been stolen from the Natural History Museum.
And obviously the project has a kind of conservation angle to it, or you're highlighting species that are becoming endangered. And the previous project you did with Perrier-Jouët as well was also talking about natural plants and plants that appear and then they die, and they're open to interpretation, but they're not done with real nature. It's kind of artificial nature. Why do you choose to have fake nature rather than working with real nature?
Good question, because in the reason, like when you already show extinct species, it's hard to, I mean, how should you then take a real equivalent? So, and as we wanted to show this natural variety, that there are things that because due to human impacts, they are endangered, especially for ephemera. We picked just plants endangered after the Art Nouveau. So we didn't pick anything before that. So for us, it was a logic step to represent them in a certain way. And if you talk about representations, you end up with artificiality. But it's interesting, this correlation, I guess, as well, because we somehow pose this question, if we have to make a fake nature in the future, if we happen to kill everything else.
Maybe not so.
Well, it's an interesting point, because already that's happening in some parts of the world, like in China. Apparently there are no pollinators left, so they're having to manually pollinate the fruit trees, and people are even thinking about having little robot bees,
like drones. So in the end, it's a bit not on purpose playing with this idea, but it immediately brings that to discussion, because
it can bring this kind of feeling like that you think, okay, could this really be in the future that we have to look at insects in this artificial way? And I think that also shows that, okay, now we have to act, and maybe now we have to still make the right decisions to that.
And anyway, because you asked why we depict it in an artificial way, even if you look in art history, in the end, if humans depict something, even if it's a drawing, it's already something made. So in the end, I think it's a natural step for a designer to then make it in an artificial way.
And also with this installation, the insects are trapped within this glass jar, which maybe it has a sort of an anti-conservation message in a way, because it looks like you've captured these insects and they're somehow suffering. Is that deliberate? I mean, they could have been flying free of glass.
I think it's an in-between. I think first when there was like when it was clear that it would be a project for the V&A and for the museum context, it was for us also clear that we wanted to show it in kind of this museum context. On the one hand, it's preserving. I mean, you can say it like trapping it, or enclosing it, or conserving it. I think you can see it from this
all angles.
And I think for the museum context, we thought it's probably the best version of it, to also bring it in this context of under glass, highlighting it in a way, also like putting it on stage and kind of protection as well. But on the other hand, of course, when they're alive and they're feeling endangered, encapsulated. So I think this duality we
We did then purpose.
On purpose, actually. That
because it's similar in a zoo, no? In a zoo, we have those animals, and nowadays, I don't know, in Vienna, for example, they have a very good panda breeding program. And then it's as well this discussion, well, they breed them and send them back to China to go then back into the wild. At the same time, they are in a house, in a little, not little cage, in a good cage, but still, it's the same duality. And it talks about humans and our relationship to nature and how we partly try to protect, partly there is the same duality in reality.
And with the project, what is your intention? Is the viewer, do you want the viewer to just simply enjoy the piece? Do you want them to go away with a greater awareness of these endangered insects? Do you want them to donate to a charity? What's your anticipated or your desired outcome?
I think definitely they should enjoy it, I think, but nevertheless, I think afterwards they should really because I think it's a very, if you have it's more an emotional response, I think you have to it. And I think emotions partly really help to rearrange maybe your dialogue or your understanding. And so we definitely think that they should think about biodiversity. Also, I think what our responsible as humans is in our biodiversity, and what everyone can do in his or her own surrounding and with his or her own decisions. And if someone donates to an environmental fund, I think it's never wrong.
But we normally, with most of our projects, we don't force a certain opinion. We don't force that somebody has to think this or that. We always try to have quite open questions that then normally the person seeing it or looking at it should try to find his or her personal answer. Because I don't know, it's not we are not strong enough maybe, or not. It's not our thing to really force someone to think this or that.
And you've been working with work that sort of imitates natural processes for a long time. Even your graduation project was that machine. It was I saw an image of it in one of your slides, the machine that kind of fabricates objects through solar power. Actually, do you want to just describe that project better than I just did? Tell us a little bit about the first graduation project.
Yeah, I think for this project, it was more about how could we maybe rethink production, that it does not necessarily mean that production is completely excluded from its natural rhythm and natural surroundings. So the whole process was actually an autonomous solar power production process, which was producing one object per day from sunrise to sunset, and incorporating in the outcome actually the different sun intensities by the thickness and color variation. And also includes actually the seasons in the production. So in winter, the objects become shorter, or at least in Austria, or like in north or south of the equator. And in summer, they become longer. And we wanted to show that it's actually possible to produce in relation with nature, but still in an artificial or technical or constructed way, but use the influences as a positive element, actually, or as a design part of it.
So yes, I think nature is really a key inspiration in a lot of our projects.
And a lot of designers now, a lot of the design world now is exploring this idea of, where does humanity meet nature? Should humans save nature, or should they replace it with artificial nature or artificial processes? But how do you think, as designers, what is your role in that discussion? Because you could say, well, actually, look, we don't need designers because they just want to make artificial things. What we need is biologists or botanists or gardeners or nature conservationists instead, and that the designers and the architects have caused this problem in the first place. Where do you think, as a profession, you sit within this discussion?
I think designers always react. And in the beginning, maybe they react to a certain scarcity of objects or scarcity of availability. Then they reacted to social circumstances of things, how they are produced. So basically, a designer always reacts to the things they see, and if possible, they try to solve it, or at least raise the question. And in our case, we react to these circumstances that we think we have to really put on the agenda, how we deal with nature, even though we don't have the answers, because I think it's this way of exploring what could maybe be some of the answers, and then it always depends on your collaboration partner what's possible, because of course if you work with a company producing something, the possibilities are different ones than working with an institution or with a cultural institution. So there are always different possibilities, but I feel like designers can really raise questions, and by raising questions, maybe make more people aware that things can be discussed and that things can be done differently.
Nevertheless, I think because you mentioned what's the position of the designer, I think a designer is always also a communicator and translator in a way of ideas, maybe of discoveries, and can either translate it into the future or take it and react at the nowadays. But in general, I think it needs not just designers or not just biologists or not just, I think it needs, or we think it needs kind of a whole collective effort and dialogue, and especially also exchange of knowledge. And I think also, I think sharing the knowledge, and others then can also work on, I think, in the same way.
And in the end, it's about balancing out.
So tell me, the plants behind you, are they real plants or are they fake plants?
No, they're really real.
They're all real plants, yes.
And is it important to have real plants? Because lots of people have artificial plants, don't they?
We don't have artificial plants. This we find rather, I don't know, stupid. But we have a rule, they have to, our plants have to be able to survive for minimum 2 weeks alone.
Yeah. And 3 of them, like avocado plants, where we took the seeds and planted them already 7 years ago. But it's
more like they happen, like they came into the studio by accident more than by planning.
And when you say you have a rule, but how do you know whether the plants are going to obey the rule or not?
Well,
because you come home after 2 weeks and a plant is dead, it's the end of the conversation anyway, isn't it?
And we know we don't take a similar one. No, but they're trained. Apparently, if they are normally quite well sustained plants, or at least in Vienna when temperatures are not too high, they manage 2 weeks easily.
Yeah. Maybe you should come and help us in the Dezeen office, because we don't have a very good track record with plants. I noticed actually the other day that we've even managed to kill some cacti, which is, you'd think would be almost impossible to kill a cactus.
Maybe too much water.
No, it definitely wasn't too much water. I think it was no water ever.
Well, then it might be the wrong direction.
Anyway, it's been great to talk to you two again. Finally, remind us, if people happen to be in Miami and they happen to want to go to the design district, where and how can they see your piece in the coming days?
It's actually in the Moore building, like where Design Miami is having their smaller fair this year. And I think it started yesterday. I think they had the opening, sort of opening, depending on the restrictions. And it will go there. It will be opened for public till the 6th of December.
And
Perrier-Jouet is, of course, the brand that you've worked with on this. Will people get a glass of champagne, or is that also not? Is that being scrapped this year as well? Do you know?
This we don't know.
This we don't know, but I think there are areas where you do get something. At least I believe so.
So that's an extra incentive for people to show up. Thomas, Katarina, it's been great to speak to you again. Thanks very much. And your plants are all looking very healthy behind you, I must say. So you chose well. And thanks to everyone for watching. And we'll be back tomorrow at 3 o'clock London time for the final episode of the Miami Design Talk series. Thanks very much, guys.